Hi everyone, my name is Phil Mazzaro, and this is I'm a town councilor from the town of Newmarket, former moderator in the town of Newmarket. I'm also a United States Army veteran and member of the Veterans for Ron Paul Coalition, a 1998 graduate of the United States Military Academy. And I'm going to be serving as the moderator. It's my absolute honor to be serving as the moderator with Congressman Paul tonight. So tonight's town hall is going to consist of a short interview format followed by questions from the audience. So for those of you out there who have questions, we'll have someone walking around with a microphone, so please allow the microphone to come to you when you ask a question. We realize that there are some Ron Paul supporters in the audience here. I think there's a few of you out here, right?
Being in obstetrics is that when things go well, and generally they always do, but you know, you actually hand something to the patient and they go home with more than they came in with. They go home with a baby. It is such a delightful part of medical practice. It is challenging. Every once in a while you have to get up at nighttime and deliver babies. You know, when I was being raised at home, we did retail dairying, and I used to hate to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, get up and deliver milk. I said, I grow up, I'm going to have a really good job. So I ended up delivering babies, and then I get up at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. But it is a great part of medicine, and I enjoyed it. I think it helped me to be very independent when I went to Washington. I was there for three terms plus a little bit more, and I want to do this for the rest of my life. So I went back to medicine and stayed there for 12 years, and then went back into Congress in '97. But medicine really was my first love, and the whole thing is I feel very fortunate in life in that I did get to practice medicine, became a surgeon, and practiced medicine in the Air Force. At the same time, I've had an opportunity to also practice what I believe in the area of economics, because it's been economic policy that drove me to get involved into politics, because I believe very sincerely many years ago we were going the wrong way, and we were going to end up with a big debt and an economic crisis, and so here we are. So I feel fortunate that I've been able to participate in dealing with economic policy in politics, as well as having that wonderful experience practicing medicine. So
let's stick with economic policy. I mean, it's great. It's been a large week, or a couple weeks for your campaign. You unveiled a very dramatic plan to balance the budget within 3 years. And also, in the first year alone, cutting over $1 trillion. So it sounds like a big cut, but when you think about it, it really reduces us back to only 2006 levels, correct?
That is right. You know, who complained the government was too small in 2006 and just think it's grown? And all we want to do, we do cut a lot. We cut 5 departments. They don't all get completely eliminated. Things get shifted around, but the goal was to reduce the number of departments. We have too many. We're going to get rid of 5. Things like the Department of Education. I don't believe we really have to have a Department of Education. For most of the programs, there are transition programs, and certainly going back to 2006 for some of the amount of monies that we were spent. Of course, the most important thing in order to have this work, you have to stop inflation, because what happens on the budget is they have this baseline budgeting, and they plan to increase the budget forever and ever. And all this talk about what's going on in the Congress with the other candidates, they talk about, yeah, we ought to cut $2 trillion, but they're not cutting anything. They propose a $10 trillion increase, they cut $2 trillion, and they brag about all the cuts. What I have proposed is that we actually have cuts and cut $1 trillion, and every once in a while they'll use negative words about, oh, this is extreme, this is terrible. But you know what I think? I think the extremists have been in charge of our government way too long, and what we need to do is
So sticking with economics and maybe a little comparison to some other candidates, Governor Romney, Herman Cain, and Governor Perry all supported TARP. You didn't. Why did you oppose, a two-part question, why did you oppose TARP, and did the bailouts work?
Well, the bailout didn't work. It temporized things. It worked for some people. the bailouts worked for those who were guilty of economic crimes because they were living beyond their means, working the system, benefiting from the Federal Reserve, and they got a lot of gambling involved with derivatives, and they got into deep problems, and they should have been allowed to go bankrupt, and that debt should have been liquidated and taken off the books. But instead, the bailout is not only bad economics, it's bad morality and bad constitutionalities, because they went to the people, and through taxation and through what the Congress passed, plus what the Fed did, they bailed out these individuals that had all these benefits. So all these programs, the housing programs that are always designed, well, we have to help the poor, make sure everybody has a house, and force banks to make certain loans and make unwise decisions. So when the crisis came, which was predictable, I mean, many of us had talked about it for years, that there was this financial bubble. But no, it was the intent, you know, it's always good to have these good intentions, but it leads to problems. So when the crisis hit, we bailed out the wrong people. Guess who lost their jobs? You know, the middle class people lost their jobs and they lost their houses. But that demonstrates it so clearly. But, you know, it's sort of like when the country gets frightened, even in areas of foreign policy or economic policy, the demagogues and the politicians like to beat the drums in order to get certain groups bailed out and say, there's a crisis going on, there's going to be a depression, you have to go back. And I thought characteristically something that was annoying in 2008, because this is when it hit, and it was actually in the middle, at the end of the last administration, and during that campaign, both major candidates, Republican and Democrat, they suspended their campaign and both ran back and voted for the bailouts. And I got to thinking, well, this is our problem. You know, both parties talk different ways, but they both support big government, sometimes for different reasons, but they both rush back. And that's why the other candidates, the three that you mentioned, actually supported this, because that was the conventional wisdom. You can't challenge conventional wisdom, and they were more sympathetic to the Federal Reserve than I've ever been, and they were sympathetic to this setup that we have where the very wealthy receive so many of the benefits, and I see that these debts are passed on. So instead of the debt being liquidated, guess what? The taxpayers own these debts. And you can't get economic growth, you can't get jobs back again until you clear the field. You have to get rid of this debt. You can't just shift it and find different victims instead of those who were guilty and had benefited unfairly. Instead of them suffering the consequences, the penalties were placed on the taxpayer, and it hasn't been done, it hasn't been taken care of yet, and that's why we're still in a recession. So I don't see how we can get economic growth again until we recognize what the real problem was, how financial bubbles come, and why it's important to get rid of the debt. I have a lot of ideas on taxes, and I do mention it in my plan, but that's not the key issue. My key issue is spending, cutting spending, because that is our problem. It is the debt of all nations, and our governments around the world, and our states. Everybody's having debt problems. So that means that we have to make cuts, like you suggest. I mean, it isn't like we're going to cut off the government. I mean, my goal is to cut it a lot more, but it's only going back to 2006. But we have to cut in order to get the economy growing again. But as long as we prop up mistakes, and that's what happens when the government gets into the business of economic planning, people overinvest and they malinvest, they go in the wrong direction, and financial bubbles form, and you have to correct it. You just can't do the same thing that caused the trouble. And that's what we've been doing for many years. We got into the trouble of too much spending and borrowing and printing money and regulating. And that's what they've been doing to try to get out of it. And guess what? It doesn't work. We need to have more confidence and faith and understanding how the free market works. We need the government to get out of the way and not serving the special interests.
One more question for me, Dr. Paul, and we'll let the audience have their say. So you're a veteran. You served in the United States Air Force. What will President Paul do to provide for a strong national defense and ensure that we're all safe?
Well, that is one of the most major responsibilities of the federal government. The major responsibility of the federal government is to do only which is authorized in the Constitution on Article 1, Section 8. It's been told that we had to have a monetary system based on gold and silver and not paper money, no central bank. So those things are high responsibility. But they also recognize that if the 13 colonies came together, that defense against invaders had to be a national issue in the federal government. So the federal government has an obligation to provide national security and safety, therefore had the authority to have the military. And right now, we spend a huge amount on military, but not enough on defense. So just because we spend money on military doesn't mean it equates to defense. And that's my argument. That's why my budget is the only one that actually cuts into this militarism. And a lot of Republicans in the past have talked about this, like Robert Taft and Eisenhower said, watch out for the military-industrial complex. And I think it distracts from us. I think it puts us in greater danger because we're too many people. We worry more about the borders between Afghanistan and Pakistan. We worry about our own borders. And so this is completely different. So I think it endangers us economically speaking because in the last 10 years, the money we spent on our military operations has contributed to about $4 trillion worth of debt. So it's huge. And great nations tend to become empires and they spread themselves too thin around the world and try to tell other people how to live. And they usually are brought down not because some nation comes along and fights a great empire. I mean, we faced down the Soviet system. And that was when I was in the Air Force. But now, just recently, of course, the Soviet system collapsed not because we had to fight the Soviets. They collapsed for economic reasons. So we're economically insecure by having a vulnerable economic system and all this debt. We are the biggest debtor in the history of the world. We owe over $3 trillion to foreigners, indebted to China. At the same time, our jobs and our businesses go overseas and we have this debt. So that is our greatest threat. But there's one thing about our military ability to defend this country. Nobody would dare touch us. We have more weapons than all the other countries put together. And we spend more money than everybody else put together. And if you add up what we spend plus what our allies spend, it's 70% of all the expenditures. So it's not like somebody's preparing to attack us, and yet all that spending is bankrupting us. At the same time, I think it causes a lot of hatred directed toward us. And I have a rule that I'd like to apply to foreign policy, is a golden rule. Don't do anything to any other country that we don't want some other country doing to us. And I believe that.
Sir, I can sit here all night asking you questions, but I know that there's a lot of people in the audience that want to ask questions. Who has the microphone? I have the microphone. All right.
Like Phil said, there's a lot of Ron Paul supporters here tonight as well, but so we're trying to really get undecided voters, because if you already support Dr. Paul, you already know about him. We need to get more people to support him. And so we're kind of looking for undecided voters here. So if you want to start picking people, I'll run over the mic to him.